What's up, my fellow harmonic traders? Welcome back to Track the Harmonic, your go-to destination for everything harmonic technical analysis. I'm your host, Lord MC. Today we got an exciting video lined up as we dive deep into the world of harmonic technical analysis. We're also going to discuss the critical economic data, the highly anticipated speech that will be given by Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell that's surely poised to shape the financial markets, as well as a continuation into earnings. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of harmonic technical analysis, let's talk about the big events that are on the horizon. In the week ahead, we have some major releases that could significantly impact the financial markets. First up, we got retail sales, which is a key indicator of consumer spending. Think of it as a pulse check on the economy. Rising sales often indicate consumer confidence, which can drive market sentiment. Next, we'll be keeping a close eye on building permits. This data provides insights into the housing market's health. An increase in building permits can signal a growing economy, while a decrease might raise some concerns. Next, we do have Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, which will be giving a speech this week. His words have a profound impact on monetary policy and, in turn, the financial markets. So very important to see what he's going to say this week. Lastly, we do have the continuation into earnings. As Friday, the banks kicked off earnings for this quarter. You got more Schwab reporting earnings, more banks like First Bank, Service Bank, Bank of America, and different sectors of the economy as well, like Lockheed Martin, J&J, United Airlines. The big one that everybody's going to be keeping a close eye on would be Tesla, Netflix, TSM. Obviously, Tesla is very important, as well as TSM, which will give us an indication of how the semiconductors may be performing this quarter. So very important week ahead of us. So make sure to stick around to learn all about harmonic technical analysis, how you can use it to navigate the upcoming market moves. So don't forget to ring the notification bell and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on the latest videos. But before I get into the charts, I want to preface by saying I am not a financial advisor. None of the things I say in my videos are ever financial advice. So question everything, do your own research, and come out with your own conclusions. So having said that, let's jump right into the charts. So jumping over to SPY here, the market had a very interesting week because it did start off a bit bullish, but unfortunately it is finding some resistance, at least for SPY here, off of the 50 EMA. You did start off bullish, but now you have 1, 2, 3, 4 days where you hit resistance at the 50 EMA. So what can we expect here, harmonically speaking, for SPY? As on Friday's close, you did generate an HSI arrow to the downside. You did manage to lose target 1 at 432.97 and are slightly close below the 9 EMA. So what can we expect here to the downside should it continue, as that HSI arrow is an indicator telling us that is a potential reversal to the downside is incoming. So what can we expect here? If it continues down, we can expect the next target I'd be looking at would be here at 429, PT1 off the dragon pattern at 427.39, and then obviously test of the 200 EMA at 425, the 200 SMA at 421, call it XA at 420, as that's where the next level SPY found support off of. So if this doesn't manage to climb back up, you do have a potential, it looks like an inverse V incoming here to test that XA target where it did find support here. It bounced off of it 4 times. Now it's kind of interesting that it's finding some resistance here 4 times in a row off the 50. So very interested to see what SPY does. The next level I'd be looking at for the upside, should you find support here around 429, is to reclaim target 1 at 432.97, finally break out of the 50 EMA and fill this gap here around 438, and then to complete the type 1 reaction all the way to target 2 here at 440.88. So the HSI, like I said, is kind of important here because it is telling us that a reversal is incoming. We just don't know if this is going to be create a lower low from this swing high to this swing low here, where it did correct off of, I believe, the 50% retracement. So yes, it hit the 50% retracement. You could start a second impulse wave here to create a lower low should it fail that, hold that 50% retracement of this wave. So very interesting to see what SPY is going to do here. Off of the weekly, you did generate an inverter hammer candle, so it's getting very tight here with the EMAs. Very interesting to see. The weekly on the HSI is kind of signaling that a potential double bottom is incoming and you could climb back up. So that is all dependent obviously on data and the earnings. Most of the earnings, I believe, are going to be a key important factor if whether the market's going to continue pushing upwards. So definitely keep an eye out on the SPY. Jumping over to the triple Qs here, so just like SPY, the triple Qs had a very bearish day on Friday with an increase in volume pressure. As we can see that the volume did tick up here from Thursday to Friday. So it's just like SPY, it did generate an HSI arrow to the downside. So what can we expect here harmonically for the triple Qs? So if this HSI arrow is indicating that a reversal is incoming to the downside and it reaches these oversold conditions, you could potentially see it come back down to 351 and change. Below that, obviously, you can complete the type 1 reaction from the dragon pattern at PT1 here at 347.61, and then test the 200 EMA there at 344.49, where there's a gap fill just slightly below the 200 SMA here around 333. To the upside, you could potentially be playing out a cup and handle. Right now you are playing out that handle, so if it's want to see the triple Q's continuation to the upside, you definitely want to reclaim back up 377.10. There is 386.41, and then OPR from the dragon pattern at 397.03. So very interesting to see what the triple Q is going to do here, if this cup and handle is going to play out or not. If it gets invalidated, I do think you might eventually come down here and complete the type 1 reaction off the dragon pattern. If we go to the weekly, it's the same thing as the SPY here. You did generate an HSI arrow last week, an HSI dot last week, where you managed to close just slightly below the last week's high. So this is a reversal candle, so we're going to see if there is going to be a reversal or not, but it all depends again on earnings, so definitely keep an eye out on the triple Qs. Jumping over to the Dow Jones here. So the Dow Jones had a also bullish week at the beginning of the week, and unfortunately it is finding resistance just slightly at the 200 EMA, and more specifically here at target 1 here at 339.34. So it did complete the type 1 reaction. So harmonically speaking, once you complete the type 1 reaction, you could come back for a type 2 return to potentially all the way down a hop. So what can we expect here for the Dow Jones to the downside, as it did generate an HSI arrow off of an increase in selling pressure here with volume to the downside. If it doesn't hold above the 90 EMA, the next level I'd be looking at to retest would be XA at 329.34. To the upside, you definitely want to break above the 200 EMA at 338, reclaim target 1 where you haven't really closed above target 1 to show strength that there's more continuation to the upside. So you definitely want to be above 339.34, then retest of 341, finally 343, fill that gap there around 344, and complete the type 1 reaction all the way to target 2 at 345.97. Off of the weekly, similar to the triple Qs and the SPY here, you did generate this inverted hammer candle with an HSI arrow triggered to the upside. So this is kind of indicating a reversal on the weekly to the upside, so obviously that can take some time. This candle that we had last week was a reversal candle, so we definitely want to see it reclaim back above 341 minimum to see if there is more continuation on the longer time frame. So definitely keep an eye out on the Dow Jones. Jumping over to IWM here. So IWM had a very interesting week where that indecision candle that was printed on Wednesday, you had some follow through with increase in selling pressure that generated the HSI arrow to the downside, and on Friday you closed below Thursday's low. So what can we expect here for IWM as the HSI looks like it's approaching that midline? You could potentially see if there's a double bottom here to retest that wick there around 169.16. Obviously, if this breaks below the HSI midline and it goes to the oversold conditions, you can continue to the downside here, maybe to 168, then 164. So off the weekly, if we jump over here real quick, you can see that it's still in this long bear flag where it did have a triple top here, and it could be setting up for a potential triple bottom. Maybe you consider this the first bottom, second, maybe third, fourth. So it's up to interpretation here. But if it does not find support here around 166, you could potentially see CD here at 162.78. What's interesting here off the weekly for IWM is that the HSI is oversold, so you could be generating a potential reversal candle here into next week, which could maybe bring it back up to a quadruple top here, but it's in one of the longest bear flags I've seen in a while, so definitely keep an eye out on IWM. Jumping over to XLF here. So XLF currently has a bullish ABCD pattern where you fell below hop, and just this week you did manage to find resistance here at the 21 EMA. You had this indecision candle on Wednesday, and then you had a hanging man with an HSI arrow triggered on Thursday, rejection off of the 21 EMA. And on Friday you left with this indecision doji candle, whatever you want to call this here. In my opinion, it's a doji candle. And what we're seeing here is an increase in selling pressure. So Friday, some of the banks did report good earnings, but unfortunately a lot of them were not able to hold their gains and lost them towards the end of the day. So what can we expect here, harmonically speaking, for XLF? Should there be more downside based off the HSI arrow saying that there's indication that there might be a reversal to the downside? The next level would be at 32.92, which is a retested hop. Below that, if you lose that, you can come back down maybe to fill that gap at $32 and change. If we jump over to the weekly here, the weekly did get a retest off of the dragon pattern at PT2, but found resistance. That weekly close last week was a reversal candle where you did manage to close just slightly above, but we're going to see if there's going to continue to hold as more bank earnings are expected to report into Tuesday. So I do think it's going to be a very interesting to see what's going to happen, more specifically with the regional banks, because I do think some of the regional banks might be underperforming, but it's only time will tell. We're obviously going to have to wait for the earnings for those. So definitely keep an eye out on XLF. Jumping over to XLE here. So XLE here currently does have this bearish Gartley where you did manage to find support off the 200 EMA. You had the reversal candle, the HSI dot, the HSI arrow indicating potential upside, and now you did manage to reclaim the 50 SMA and are looking like you're heading towards that XA target there at 90.57. As you could tell, the HSI did cross the midline, so if it does reach these overbought conditions, I do think you have another shot there at $93.69, which was the high here. And obviously above that, you have HOP to complete the type 2 return to HOP at 95.60. If you get rejected off XA here, you can come back down to retest 88.44, which are where the 9 and 50 EMA is at. Below that, obviously losing that, you come down to 85.73. Retest the 200 EMA there around 84 and change. Losing that, you can come back down to complete the type 1 reaction to target 2 at 81.77. So right now to the HSI does have a bit of room to the upside. Obviously, this increasing to the upside could be bad for the market, as crude oil barrels is going right now for, I believe, 87, excuse me. So it is climbing back up above 90. So like I said before, usually when crude oil finds support there above 90, it shoots up again to around 94, 93, $95 range. So that could be potentially signifying that the oil sector or the energy sector wants to continue pushing, which could be bad for some, depending on how you look at it, especially with inflation. It could be bad for the market, and the market may react accordingly. So definitely keep an eye out on XLE. Jumping over to Apple here. So Apple does have this bullish shark pattern playing out right now. And after a very bullish, what looks to be, it's from the hammer candle here up until Thursday, that was 10 days in a row where just continuation to the upside. So finally, you did manage to get a red candle here for Apple, where you did generate an HSI arrow to the downside. So what can we expect here for Apple? If it tries to reach oversold conditions, you could potentially have it come back down to HOP at 170, 163. Obviously, losing the terminal bar here is kind of a key level here. If it doesn't hold terminal bar, I do think there is that potential case scenario to come back to test HOP there, where the 200 conveniently is at now. So if it does manage to find support here, you could potentially play out a cup and handle and come back up to break above 182.94, 184.95, and then target one there at 187.62. You could potentially also be forming a inverse head and shoulders here, as this is a left, this is the head, and right now you could come back down for that right shoulder. So very interesting to see what Apple is going to do here. If we jump over to the weekly, similar to the SPY and to the Qs, you do have this inverted hammer candle. So the slight increase in compared to last week. So you did generate an HSI dot here. So there could be some more upside here for Apple. Maybe just Friday was a cooling off period, as it did have a crazy 10 days where it just, or I think it's 9 days in a row, 8 days in a row, where it continued to push green. So definitely keep an eye out on Apple to see if there's more continuation. If it finds support here off the terminal bar, I do think there is more upside incoming for Apple. So definitely keep an eye out on Apple. Jumping over to Microsoft here. So Microsoft, you had that indecision candle. You did generate an HSI arrow, and you could be potentially coming down. It looks like a cup and handle as well. So the next level I'd be looking at to see if there's more continuation to the downside would be a retest at 322.29. Below that, you come back down for a double bottom around 309, where conveniently the 200 EMA is at around 307 and change, and then XA at 304.26. To the upside, if you manage to hold support just slightly around 324, which would create that cup and handle, the next level I'd be looking at to reclaim would be 341, and then finally 349.67. Above that, I do think you have potential for all-time highs. So if we go to the weekly, you do have this bearish shark pattern where you had a inverted hammer candle rejection off of 886 here, OB at 334.14, but you did generate an HSI dot to the upside. So This level here at 322.29 is key in my opinion for Microsoft. So if you manage to find support there and continue, then you can see terminal bar at 351.47 and then a new all-time high around hop there at 368.74. So definitely keep an eye out on Microsoft. Jumping over to Amazon here. So Amazon, similar situation, kind of looks like Microsoft as well. You have a potential cup and handle. We have an HSI arrow where you managed to close just below BC there at 129.99 and just slightly above the 90 MA. So what can we expect here if it reaches oversold conditions, as the HSI is indicating that a reversal is coming back down? The next level I'd be looking at would be the 200 EMA there around 122.97, then target 1 to complete the type 1 reaction at 119.87. Below that, then you obviously have the retest of the 200 SMA at 115.46. To the upside, if you manage to hold this area here and this cup and handle plays out, I'd be looking at to reclaim 129.99 and test the 200 SMA here, where on Thursday you did get rejected off the 50 SMA. You did get rejected off of there, so managed to close above ABCD there at 134.17. You had that gap there around 135.25 and then 139.14, then terminal bar at 143.64. So definitely keep an eye out on Amazon. If we jump over to the weekly, you do have another inverted hammer candle with that bearish bat pattern playing out where you're not able to close above BC at 139, so you definitely want to close above it and then reclaim 139.14 off of XA and then 155.75 for Amazon. So definitely keep an eye out on Amazon. Jumping over to Tesla here. So Tesla is having a hard time breaking above 263. It did manage to go as high as almost 270 off of Tuesday, but unfortunately it is now below 253.80. So what can we expect here? Harmonically to the downside, if there's more continuation here, as it did cross the midline. If it loses the 50 SMA here, the next level would be looking at would be 234, right kind of close to the 200 EMA, which is at 232 and change. Below that, obviously, you have 223.85, and then the gap fill there around 218, the 200 SMA around 212. If it manages to find support here and reclaim to the upside 253.80, then the next level would be looking at here would be the white swan at PT2 here at 263.08, where it's having a hard time finding support here. The last time it actually broke above it and found support above PT2 here was back in early September, where it just shot up to above 276. So for Tesla here, in order to get bullish, I do think it needs to close above 263.08, and you can see 276 and even higher there, where you can go back to XA at, where there's a gap fill at 288, XA at 289, CD is calling at 299, and then that psychological level at 300. So Tesla does report earnings here, so a lot of these indicators and these pattern formations it'd be a very tricky situation to rely on, as earnings can go either way, right? It's a 50-50 chance there that they report good earnings or bad earnings, or it could be nothing as well. So I think what's going to be important here is to look at guidance for Tesla and see what they're gonna say. So off the weekly, you do have this bearish bat pattern where you did generate an shooting star here off the weekly. Weekly target 1 is at 233.85. Below that, obviously, you have that 200 SMA and 200 EMA, 206, and then 196. Below that, you have target 2 at 177.25. Above that support level, like I've said, which is a key level at 253.80, XA is at 289.63, and then hop at 343.69. So definitely keep an eye out on Tesla and see what it's going to do, as a lot of attention is going to be on this stock for this week. Jumping over to Google. So Google does have a white swan pattern. It finally found some resistance here on Thursday, where it went as high as 141, but managed to generate an HSI arrow to the downside, and you managed to close below XA at 137.50. Right now, if this is going to continue to the downside with that potential HSI arrow indicating that it's going to go to oversold conditions, could be all the way back down to target 1 here. Even below that, you have 127. Google was in a clear uptrend here, so it's finally finding some resistance. You could potentially just find support here on the 21 EMA here. So Google is still, in my opinion, strong, but if it does lose a 21 EMA here, I do think you can come back down for that inverse V here. So to the upside, if you manage to hold here at 137.50, right now from the swing low to the swing high, you retrace so far up to not even the 382. So if it does come and retrace maybe the zone there at between the 0.5 and the 618, and to find support, you can potentially come back for a higher high, indicating that it wants to continue pushing back up to OPR at 142.64. Hop is at 143.41. If we go to the weekly, You did generate a bat pattern here where it's the second week in a row above XA at 136.90. As the HSI is approaching that midline, it could either reject from that midline, which could indicate downside, or cross the midline, which could indicate upside. To the upside, you have 152.32. Below that, you obviously have target 1 here at 117.12 and target 2 104.22. So this is obviously off of the weekly, so that could take some time. So definitely keep an eye out on Google. Jumping over to Meta. So Meta on the week did have a bullish push up here around 3. The high there was at 330.54, but unfortunately you found resistance there, and the HSI arrow did generate, which could indicate a potential reversal to the downside is incoming, as Friday was a bit bearish, as well as increase in selling pressure occurred there on Friday. So below that, if this continues for an inverse V, as I like to call it here, the next I would be looking at would be 21 EMA here at 309. Meta tends to find support around the $300 range, so it likes to stay above that level. So the next level at the 50 would be 301.98, and then when it does wick down below, it tends to really recover really quickly. So the HSI is approaching that midline, so that could be around the 50 SMA, 50 EMA where it finds support, and then it continues for longer. If we go over to the weekly you did have this inverted hammer candle where you closed slightly below last week's close high there, so it is on increase in volume. So there's quite a significant push to the downside off the rejection of that $330 range. So definitely keep an eye out on Meta to see if there's more continuation to the upside here, because it is trying to hold up above here. So just needs to continue pushing upwards, because if it does, then I do think you can see it above even 330. So you have a big gap there, not a gap, but a potential I do think there is a gap here. Let me just double check. Yeah, there's a gap around 360 if I'm not mistaken. Just gotta zoom in a little bit closer here. It's a little small gap there around 360, 361. So I do think if Meta decides to continue pushing before earnings, it could be very bullish, but we'll definitely have to maybe it slows down here and starts trading in that range again, the $300 range, until earnings, because they report earnings on October the 25th. So definitely keep an eye out on Meta. Jumping over to NVDA here. So NVDA did have a very bullish week up until Friday. On Thursday, it did go as high as 476.09, just $4 short of my target for the week at 480. But Friday, you did get an increase in selling pressure here, where you managed to close at 454.61 with the low being 452.80. So what can we expect here harmonically? The next level to the downside, should there be more continuation, would be the 50 EMA here at 443. And then target 1 there at 432.82. Below that, you have XA at 410 and HOP at 389.74, which would also fill a gap to the downside. To the upside, the next level would be looking again. This would be 480 and then 493.76. Obviously, TSM reports earnings this week, which could affect NVIDIA here as it is in the semiconductor space. So I do believe that if TSM manages to report good earnings, you could see continuation to the upside on NVIDIA. To the downside, if they report bad earnings, then I think things can get interesting for these semiconductors. So definitely keep an eye out on NVIDIA here. Jumping over to Netflix. So Netflix continuation here to the downside. This after the rejection of the 21 EMA here on Tuesday, you did manage to close below on Friday up to 355.68, which the low was at 352.05. So you did manage to complete the type 1 reaction off this ABCD pattern here. So the next level I'd be looking at here for continuation, if to the upside or to the downside here, harmonically speaking, we'll talk about the downside because it did cross the HSI midline. So there is still more downside for Netflix here. Obviously on Friday you closed on an indecision candle here with the doji. So kind of an indecision level here where the market wants to go with Netflix. So if it does continue to the downside, there is a gap there at 341 and change. Below that, you have target 2 at 313.89. This obviously will be leading up to earnings here, which could be potentially a trap there for bears here to play out that gap fill. So definitely keep an eye out on Netflix, because Netflix for earnings does have wild swings and high percentages up or down. So it's going to be interesting to see what it does here to the downside or to the upside. If we go over to the weekly and see what the weekly is doing, the weekly is hovering for a potential death cross where you did manage to close below the 50 EMA, the 50 SMA here, and you do have this black swan where PT2 is at 343.48, and then below that you have 321.28, CD at 285 and 259. Obviously that's a little bit bearish there, and obviously could take some time if it does even come down to those levels, but it's definitely finding maybe a reversal candle here off the weekly, because the HSI is almost in oversold condition, so you could potentially put in a reversal candle back to the upside. You did have a 921 crossover off the weekly on last week, so if there's more continuation with that playing out, then you could potentially see these target 2 at least being hit. So keep an eye on Netflix, because this should be very interesting to see what it does. So lastly here, we'll be jumping over to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is looking like it's finding support at the 50 SMA. You did manage to generate an HSI arrow to the upside on Sunday. So what can we expect here? We'll talk about the targets to the upside if that is a potential reversal candle off the harmonic target here. The next level I'd be looking at would be target 1 again at 27.5. Obviously the resistance there at the 200 SMA, which is around 28K, 27.9. Above that you have target 2 at 29.2K. If you're not able to hold above that level there, you can come back down to test the 50 SMA, which is around 26.7. Below that you obviously have XA at 25.5K. Below that you can come back down to test this bottom here where the point D was generated, where the low was at 24.9. Below that then you can come back down to hop at 23.7K. So getting very tight here for Bitcoin. If we jump over to the weekly, there's still that dragon pattern playing now, which is sandwiched between the 21 and the 50 EMA, and it is off, at least off decrease in volume here to the downside. So to the upside you have obviously the 200 SMA there around 28.3K, and then BC at 30K, and then OPR at 32.7K. Below that you can come back down to test the 200 EMA in the weekly, where it has managed to hold support. So below that would be very concerning, because you can come down to test the 25.6K. Below that you have completion of the type 1 reaction off the dragon pattern at PT1 at 22.8K, and then PT2 is at 15.4K, which is kind of a level that I don't know that it can hit, but you know, anything can happen. So that's basically it for me, guys. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday. If you want to catch me streaming, I do stream live on Twitch Monday to Friday from market open to market close. So if you want to follow me there, the link to my Twitch is going to be in the description box below. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday. I'll see you guys tomorrow. So take care, everybody, and peace.